eyes are now on Myanmar, a land filled with opportunities and untapped natural resources. Investors and business leaders around the world have started exploring this new land. Myanmar's economy seems to be on the upward trend.
The famous Asian development banker ADB has recently launched a report projecting Myanmar's economy that will expand 7 to 8% a year and that the country could be a middle income by 2030 if Myanmar can keep up with the reforms and cope with challenges that may destabilize the projected growth.
And Tours 2015 has had the opportunity to sit down to talk with Ms. Cyn-Young Park, an ADB Assistant Chief Economist who conducted this report. Let's hear from her what she has to say about her findings and suggestions for Myanmar's government to maintain the growth of its economy.
About the results, the findings of your research.
Well, in fact, we've been doing this research over the past 6 months or so. Since Myanmar undertake a more sincere reforms in 2011, the ADB has been keen on understanding the Myanmar's economy and then finding the areas where we can provide more effective development assistance. Well, there's no doubt that Myanmar has a very strong potential for growth. It has rich natural resources, plentiful youth population, and its very geographical advantages. So if the Myanmar stays true to the reforms, it should be able to replicate the region's fast-growing economies and grow 7 to 8% per year, tripling its per capita GDP income by 2030. That will put Myanmar safely in the ranks of the middle-income countries, the shoulder to shoulder with many of the other region's fast-growing economies.
So what was the forecast for the GDP for Myanmar from the ADB this year and probably in the next few years ahead?
Well, our April forecast for Myanmar growth was 6% for this year and then 6.3% next year. But we feel that there's going to be much more upside risks to the growth forecast as of now. The Myanmar is benefiting a lot from increasing the foreign indirect investments, especially in the oil and gas and mining and power sector industries.
And which sector do you see, the most potential for being so attractive for Myanmar? Which sectors?
Well, Myanmar has rich natural resources, which is already accounting for majority of its exports. Of course, Myanmar has beautiful nature and long and glorious history. It has also, like a kind of unusual and then nice mountainous areas and beach area. So Myanmar has a strong potential for tourism. Myanmar, on the back of strong agricultural resources, shows very good potential for further development in the agriculture and the rural sector. Those are, we see as like a low-hanging fruit, including the low-cost sort of labor-intensive manufacturing. Given that Myanmar does show very positive demographics, the pictures. So a lot of areas that Myanmar could invest for the quick sort of returns include the low-cost labor-intensive manufacturing, the telecommunication, given the starting from very low the base, tourism, and then of course agriculture.
Have you discussed with probably the presidents or the government officials or the opposition party, the opposition leaders about the economy, the growth, the potential of Myanmar?
Not me personally. Nonetheless, ADB management have been engaging in various consultation meetings with the Myanmar's top government officials, including the president, also the leader of the opposition party, Do Aung San Suu Kyi.
What are the promises that the government promised to do in terms of maintaining the growth for the country?
Well, the government actually made it public that it is aiming to achieve balanced and inclusive growth. And it has introduced many reforms on the diverse fronts, coming from the macroeconomic management to the investment, also the monetary policy reforms, taxation, and they are following up also with its earlier sort of reform on the privatization, promoting the private sector participation in various economic activities, so that the government reassures us that they are staying on track for these reforms. Of course, there are some cautious observations in the region as well, that this is a country that is really emerging from such an extended period of isolation, and this is the first sort of a sincere move by the government. We are all hopeful, but at the same time, I think people are also realistic about how far and then how fast the reforms can go.
Okay, when many people say, I would say the international community says more reforms need to be done. Could you clarify on that? What kind of reforms, or
Well, the government has introduced at least some of the key fundamental macroeconomic reforms. It has introduced the new central bank law that provides operational autonomy for the central bank to be able to work to ensure the price stability. It has also unified the multiple exchange rates that has been the significant hindrance to the foreign investment. Now they have established the unified, the exchange rate with a managed float. So that's another significant reform. Government is working on strengthening its taxation. They are looking very carefully how to, broaden the tax bases, how to remove some of the concessionary taxation benefits. Also, they are trying to, make sure that the tax system becomes much more transparent, equitable, and then efficient.
And what are the biggest challenges that Myanmar could face?
Well, emerging from decades of isolation, Myanmar does need to provide much more sound, legal, regulatory, institutional framework for the businesses to participate in economic activities. Its transition to the market sort of based economies will require a lot of certainty in terms of the its macroeconomic indicators. It should maintain that sort of low and stable inflation, more like a flexible exchange rate and market-based sort of exchange rates. Also, it should ensure that its fiscal conditions remain more sustainable and sound for the long term.
And what should the government do? I mean, in ADB's opinion, what should government do more in terms of maintaining the potential growth of the country?
Myanmar needs to strengthen its foundation for growth. It needs to invest heavily in infrastructure, both physical and soft. And it also needs to develop its human resources further. They have already started to increase the spending on the health and education. Much more needs to be done. To finance these, the massive investment needs for development, the Myanmar does also need to work on how to mobilize the resources more efficiently. Definitely, the taxation and then increasing the government revenue is going to be one area that they have to work to secure some funding for its priority development spending. It has to modernize its banking and financial sector. It has to help build a domestic sort of resource base by increasing the savings in the in the country.
Okay, and earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that the development, the benefit, I mean, everyone in Myanmar should benefit from this development. And how can we ensure that everyone will benefit from this?
Yeah. Well, one of the priority areas is going to be rural and then agricultural sector. In the rural area, vast majority of the country's poor live on agriculture. Improving the agricultural productivity is going to be really like a first and then a relatively easy step to ensure that the growth becomes more inclusive and then benefit the people and lift the people out of the poverty.
Focusing on the rising of Myanmar economy after decades of isolation.